Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
And we're here at GDC 2016 at the Valve booth to try out their new content. They have an experience called The Lab, which is a collection of mini games, demos, lessons learned from their experimentation in roomscale VR.
They said they've been working internally on a lot of experiments, and this is what they've been working on for years now, and they've sort of thrown it into a little play toy box.
So it's about 14 demos, that experiences in the demo that anyone who has an HTC Vive will be able to use, and just it'll show up in their Steam library. And speaking of the HTC Vive, we have between us right now the final consumer version. Look, it doesn't say free on the top of it right now. Jimmy, can you tell me what the differences are? Can you even notice them?
If I wasn't told, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I happen to know that this strap is a little bit different, and you told me that the jack is a little more robust, right?
Right, the headphone jack, which still comes out of a cable, and you plug in that 3.5 millimeter jack to your headphones or earbuds, that's a little more robust so it won't drop off. Also, I'm told that the bottom of the Vive controllers, this material is a little more grippy, and I can feel it's a little more textured, so it's not going to slip from your hand or maybe work with sweat resistance. This one doesn't even have the strap, but it will come with a wrist strap. But let's go play The Lab. Now, got to give a caveat, they aren't letting us film the screen, so you're going to watch us play, and we're going to give you some impressions. We're going to chat with one of the developers and talk about the experience afterward. So I'm now here with Jeep Burnett, who's a developer at Valve. You work with the content team for VR. You're the team that showed off the first Aperture robot repair a year ago.
Yeah, it was an amazing year last year. We spent a lot of time on robot repair and showed it, and like the reaction was insane. Going from 0 to a million.
Exactly, right?
Second,
The very first thing for hand presence, for room scale, was robot repair. It's a high bar to set. And in that year, we've seen a lot of content makers, from indie developers to Lucasfilm, try to take those lessons and experiment and learn about what works in room scale.
Yeah.
So at GDC, you guys are showing off The Lab. And can you describe what The Lab is?
So The Lab is a combination of all the different experiments we've been doing over the last couple of years. We've been doing a lot of experimentation in VR. You've seen Secret Shop is another example of that. The Longbow, which has been out there, we shipped that out to developers so that they could have an example of haptics and input. So that's just a few examples, but we've been doing all these different things behind the scenes, and we've really just taken our favorites or the best of and really polished them up and turned it into something that we can show to customers that they can actually enjoy. And it's like a sampler of all the different types of things you can do in VR.
And there's so much more, but this is like in the few years you guys have been working on it, that's what you have experimented with so far. And I like that every demo shows off a different part of room scale and things that you've concepts, even similar concepts like teleportation and locomotion, stuff like that. Are there about 12 to 14, you say, total demos?
Yeah, more than a dozen. Yeah.
More than a dozen. Some of them variants, and they're different lengths, right?
Yep, all of them are different types of things. Some are more passive experiences where you can just chill out. Some are games. You have all kinds of different things, and we're saving a few surprises in there so that people can try it out. But I mean, it really is just this conversation we want to have with our fans and with our customers, so that they can see what do we think about VR, and so that other developers can see some of the lessons, some of the things we've tried, and we even shipped some mistakes in there. There's things that we tried that didn't work so well, and you'll get a sense of those too, and there's things that worked out great. It's all these different experiments.
I like that in the few that I tried, they all have that Valve flair, the production design, the humor, the writing, and it was all very lovely.
Thank you.
Can we talk a little bit specifically about some of those
Sure, what was
demos?
your favorite of those?
I really like the space shooting, the spatial arcade.
Yeah, Zortex.
Yeah, Zortex, where I'm holding using the controller, basically a mini drone, and as opposed to you think of Geometry Wars or something, a 2-stick shooter, it is one control, but I felt like this was virtual reality asteroids. Like the
Totally.
spatial awareness that you would need, the asteroids brings on a 2D screen. This is in a 3D plane, and you don't need your body presence there.
Yeah, it's
You're
cool.
just focused on your hand.
There's this very situational awareness where you have to look around, see where all the things are, grab the power-ups, and you're kind of dodging in and out of stuff. And even though you're only dodging with the ship, you still have to move your body to get to safer areas. If lots of bullets are coming this way, it's sort of a bullet hell thing. You want to dodge and get to the other side where it's a lot more clear. And so, it was a really fun experiment. That one has gone through a lot of different evolution, and each of the different experiments that you play, it opens up sort of this gizmo in the main hub area that you can play with. And so that one actually opens up a remote control drone that can fly around, which is another version of the game that we had at one point. And so you can kind of see these layers of different things that we tried, and you'll get a sense of those.
No, the Longbow one, we saw Longbow as one of the first SteamVR demos, and you said it was a demonstration of haptics. And so when you're knocking the arrow, you feel the vibration.
Yeah, and also as you're pulling back the string, as you pull it goes, and when you do that, it really has this like psychological weird, brain trick where essentially you feel like there's this tension on the string. And so that was something that kind of surprised us when we first did that. And we built a couple different types of weapons, but we just found that the bow being two-handed and having that really interesting haptic feel as you pull it back turned out to just work really well.
Now what about Slingshot? What is that supposed to show and experiment with?
So Slingshot was, we were experimenting with doing a lot of high fidelity rendering. Like if you compare it against some of the other ones you saw there, it's got some really interesting lighting and stuff in it. So that was sort of a test of that visual polish and trying to get the fidelity up and get the frame rate high. But we also found that no matter what space you're in, whether it's even a big house, it gives you this massive warehouse that you're in. It gives you this very, very strong sense of space as you see things launching out in the distance, all these giant mountains crumbling in the distance. And so it's really just like when you take the headset off after that, you're like, wow, I'm in a little room. This is really, it just gives you this huge sense of space. And so
we got a little
really
sense of that at the end of the robot repair when the walls go away and you see behind aperture science.
It's definitely a repeat of that. Yeah, that's true.
Interesting. And then what about the photogrammetry, the postcard demo? Is that something that anyone you imagine will be able to create in the future? And
yeah, so Adam Foster actually he did a blog post. It was about 6 months ago about the photogrammetry experiments he was doing, and we call them postcards now because they're all these real-world locations that you want to go and visit. We have a couple different places, and these are places that he's just gone, taken his camera, taken snapshots, like handheld snapshots, and then in an offline process he compiles this into this just beautiful vista to walk around and explore. And you have your companion there you can play fetch with while you're out in those places. But we expect that it's going to become a lot more common. They're just so compelling that people will build the tools to make sort of an end-to-end process where you can feed your pictures in and then get this scene out.
You have a whole spectrum of experiences that aren't necessarily games, and some stuff that have very game-like features where you're trying to hit targets.
Yep.
Now, all of this is a demo, hand presence, and room scale. Are any of these experiments, they work for the sitting, for the desktop experience, or are they all for standing?
So actually, just for testing purposes, I've been playing through all the content seated just to see if I could, and it's actually possible. Maybe the hardest of those is Slingshot, because you have to use the button to lower it down to a lower height, and you can kind of sit there and just pull it back and shoot your Slingshot stuff. You can actually play through all the games seated, since there's the teleport feature for moving around. It's a different type of feel when you move with your legs versus move with teleporting, but it's definitely something you can play in a very small space.
Do you also play with scale in any of the demos?
Yeah, so actually the Secret Shop demo that we showed, previous last year, is included within the lab, and that has scale in it.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, can't wait to play the rest of the lab. Thank you so much, Chief, for chatting with me.
Thanks for coming and checking it out.
So that was the lab. Now, we only got to play, I think, 4 or 5 of the experiences.
Right, you're in sort of a hub at one point, and you look towards a chalkboard where you saw a list of all the experiments that they aren't announcing yet, but they said by launch time, and this will be available at launch, you'll be able to play looked like at least 10 of those things.
Yeah, they had 10 things on a virtual chalkboard. Their tongue-in-cheek way of saying these are things they're still working on.
Yeah.
One of them was the robot repair, the aperture robot repair,
Cool.
So that's just me a part of it. And it turns out a lot of the original SteamVR demos, things that pop up, developers got to try out, have a polished version in here. Things like the Longbow demo, which is an archery demo. They turn it into a little mini game, into a wave-based mini game where enemies come toward your castle. And
Kind
you
of a
shoot
tower
them out.
defense where you're the only tower.
Yeah, so let's run through actually the demos, the ones that we got to play one at a time. The first one's called Postcard, and this is kind of a passive exploratory demo where it's turning photogrammetry modeled environments in the real world into the virtual space.
It looked, I didn't get to play this one, but it looked to me like it was the background may have been done photogrammetry, but the environment, couldn't have been. That was geometry.
There was actual geometry.
You were walking. You couldn't walk, but you were teleporting around a rocky area.
Yeah.
But the coolest thing was there was a dog in space, a robotic dog.
So I think, when you think of photogrammetry, you think of 360-degree spheres, kind of like the Google Street View type of environments, which that's not real room scale VR. So what they're doing here is taking that type of environment scanning and then modeling geometry, someone has a designer has a hand say, okay, we're putting this image on the floor, this is how far you can walk out to the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
And then they're also dropping in virtual actors. In this case, an Aperture Science puppy that you could throw a stick around. I did try to throw it off the cliff. It's very smart, didn't jump off the cliff, and went down the mountain.
Super cute.
And it was a great way to experience. I think when you think of like VR tourism, this is what VR tourism is going to be. You're not walking through cities yet, but like places like top of mountain peaks, room environments, and they can do an interesting mix of the world scanning and also VR objects.
I can see a lot of people using this one to introduce their friends to VR for the very first title that they try, because there's nothing intimidating about it. You can get into an environment, it's very relaxing, and there's a dog. Who doesn't want to play fetch with a dog?
I enjoyed just interacting with the dog, rubbing its belly. The animations were lovely, and that's the kind of thing that Valve is really great at, putting personality into their characters, into their games. Now, speaking of personality, the next experience I played was called Slingshot, which is set in the Aperture Science Portal universe with all the orbs, all the cores that have all their personalities. And this is a game that demonstrated the virtual scale of VR, rendering a massive warehouse that you can see a mile into the distance, but in the real world, you only have your 10 foot by 10 foot or 15 foot by 15 foot room. It's a slingshot game, so you pull the core back and launch it, and you break boxes, try to activate them.
It looked to me like in order to really pull it back as far as you could to get the furthest distance, you actually had to walk backwards.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So room scale kind of comes into play there a little bit.
Yeah, and the smart thing they did, as with all slingshot games, they gave you a holographic impression of what your last move was. So you knew the last time you shot and you let go here, and then you can adjust that to try to hit the distance. But I think it was successful in giving you that scale, because you're shooting objects way far off in the distance. And so when you take off the headset, you do feel like, wow, that was taking me to a bigger room than it actually was in. The next demo was Longbow. Did you get to try Longbow?
I did, yeah. I enjoyed it. It was it's the little stick figures that played a role in the Aperture Science demo that were inside the drawer. Two-dimensional black and white figures. It's this play castle area, and you're on top of one of the walls, and they come out of doors and they start to march towards your gate, and you have to shoot your bow at them, and you just continually fire these physics arrows at them. You can light them on fire. You can shoot barrels to make them explode. You can hit targets which dump oil down onto them, and it's generally really fun. It's basically a physics game. You're trying to aim your arrows ahead of them, lead them, and arc them correctly, and it's pretty fun.
So I think this demo demonstrated a couple things. One, definitely the room scale, because you're encouraged to look over the edge of the tower and look down. You're also demonstrating two-handed physics. So an object that you actually, is not just a sword, not just an axe you throw or a ninja star, it's a bow and arrow. You have to work your hands together. So you're putting these controllers fairly close together to fire the arrow. And then also haptics, the vibration in the controllers themselves. The further you pull the arrow back, the more tense the controller vibrates, and so you get actual feedback.
They were using the haptics in an interesting way. I was hearing it in your Slingshot demo as well. As you pulled it back, it would go. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then the last thing we did, which I think was my favorite,
easily.
I think it's called Zortex, and it's their arcade demo. This puts you in a smaller sphere. It's not nearly as big as the demo room we were in, but you control, via this controller, a tiny drone, which is like an asteroid ship. I call it's asteroids in VR.
It was very much like that. You are in the sphere, but your body is obviously not represented. You control this ship, and your controller basically is the size of the ship. And all you have to do is no button pressing. All you do is aim at the enemies, and if you're aimed correctly, you start to fire at them, and enough hits and they explode. And if the ones that are glowing blue explode, you touch your controller to it to attach that power up. And if you get enough of those, you you get this laser beam ability, which is just like being a Ghostbuster. It's freaking awesome. You pull the trigger, out this huge laser beam comes, and you can just like sword through all of the bad guys.
I love that this demonstrated presence and room scale without needing hand presence or body presence.
Yeah.
You didn't need to see your body in the environment. You're a ghost.
It's true.
You didn't need to see your hand at all either, because it was just a flying spaceship.
But as I told one of the developers, it took me about a minute to be okay with being hit by those lasers, my body, because they're, laser beams, you're just trying to make the ship avoid them. They can fly straight through your head, your body, and I understood in the scope of the game that was okay, but I wasn't necessarily okay with that right away. It's an interesting kind of immersion factor.
You have to almost distance yourself from your sense of body and just use your vision and your situational awareness and gaze around and look at the room and walk around that room to move your ship around. It was one-to-one controls. There was no acceleration or anything. It's perfect control, and it was. I think this is asteroids in a 3D space.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be a fun one. I mean, there's lots of good depth particle effects. You really feel like there's a lot going on in the space.
Now, the last thing we did is also a VR experience, not part of the lab, but actually something they announced recently: the ability to play traditional flat screen games in VR. And they had a demo with Broforce. It renders full screen on your desktop, and then you see it as a massive display in a virtual environment. I love this.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, you can already do this with VR desktop, but this is the official Steam implementation of it, and they're saying it's going to be ready at launch as a beta, and you'll be able to try, any game that you want in it. They're saying almost every game will work, but the game does have to conform to a certain kind of mode, so it might be that a few games don't work, but they're not going to blacklist anything. It's not like a whitelist kind of thing. You just, any game you want to try in VR on a huge TV that's in front of you while you sit in a virtual living room is you can try it.
And there will be a little bit of a performance trade-off. You're going to get a little bit of latency on the order of milliseconds of extra latency, just because they have to add it to the pipeline. They actually have to render 90 FPS of the environment.
That's right.
And render that resolution. It's not a complex environment. It's like a domed area. You're floating. You have no body presence at all. But they have to render that. So there's a performance trade-off, and that's one of the reasons I think they showed us a 2D game on this, which is running only at 30 FPS.
True, but people who are buying systems to run Oculus, they're going to have pretty decent systems. I wouldn't be surprised if most games are playable on this. The game actually will run at the frame rate of your monitor. So that they're working on getting the games to be able to run at 90, but currently they'll be capped at probably 60 if that's what your monitor runs at. Broforce that we played only runs at 30 by design. So that.
And it has a similar glow effect that we saw with like Oculus Cinema, Oculus Video, where the light emitted from the virtual screen actually illuminates the room you're in, and that enhances the believability. It looks like an entire wall is the game.
Yeah, I think that what people are going to want to do as soon as they check this out is to play, couch multiplayer games online.
Yes.
In VR with their friends, and certainly that's got to be in the back of their minds.
Now, no talk of avatar systems yet at all. You're still just a floating disembodied thing. It's not what Oculus is doing with Oculus Social in terms of watching a screen and watching a Twitch stream or something. So hopefully that will come in the future. We didn't get a chance to film what was on the screen in the lab, but it's going to come out soon. We're going to get a code, and we're going to do another video in our office showing you guys exactly what those experiments are.
Cool.
Until then, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video. We have more coverage from GDC on the site. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, guys. I'll see you next time.